No one noticed when the vase first cracked. It sat quietly on the windowsill of a small cottage at the edge of the forest, bathed in golden morning light, holding wildflowers picked from the meadow. To the casual eye, it was just another piece of clay, a vessel like any other. But to its maker, an old craftsman named Elias, it was different. This vase had a story. The crack appeared one winter night. The cold had seeped into the walls, the fire had died too soon, and the vase shivered under the weight of silence. When Elias discovered the thin line running down its side the next morning, he sighed. A cracked vase could no longer hold water. It was, in the eyes of many, ruined. But Elias, though weary with age, was not a man who threw things away easily. He touched the crack gently, almost as if comforting it, and whispered, "You still belong here." He placed it back on the windowsill, empty now, its flowers transferred to another pot. Days turned into weeks, and the vase remained there, forgotten by everyone except the sunlight. Each morning, when the first rays touched its broken body, the crack shimmered faintly, catching the light in a way that the smooth surface never had. It did not know it, but its flaw had begun to turn into something extraordinary. One evening, a little girl from the village wandered into Elias's cottage. Her name was Leora, a child with eyes full of curiosity and questions too big for her age. She noticed the vase immediately. "Why don't you throw it away?" she asked, her small finger tracing the jagged line. "It's broken." Elias smiled, a smile that seemed to carry both sadness and wisdom, because even broken things can shine in ways the perfect ones never will. Leora tilted her head, confused but intrigued. "Shine? But it can't hold flowers anymore." "Perhaps not," Elias said softly. "But sometimes our worth is not in what we were made to do. Sometimes it is in what we discover we can do instead." That night, the girl could not stop thinking about the cracked vase. She dreamed of it glowing in the dark, the crack blazing like a golden river, guiding lost travelers home. When she woke, her heart pounded with something she couldn't name. And so began a tale neither she nor the vase could yet understand. A story of brokenness, of beauty hidden in imperfection, and of how even the smallest cracks could become windows through which light enters. The night the moon slipped a blade of silver into the crack, everything changed. Leora returned to the cottage after dusk with a stub of a candle cupped in both hands, the flame licking the air like a small, hungry tongue. Elias had fallen asleep in his chair, spectacles tilted on his nose, but the vase sat awake on the windowsill, keeping its quiet watch over the path and the dark line of forest beyond. When Leora saw how the moonlight gathered along the fracture, bright as a thread pulled through cloth, her breath caught. She held up the candle to the crack and watched the light quiver like a nervous secret. "May I?" she whispered to the room, as if asking the air for permission. Elias stirred, blinked, and nodded. Leora set the candle inside the empty vase, careful as a promise. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the room bloomed. The flame found the fault line and poured itself outward in a trembling ribbon, painting the walls with a golden seam. The good clay stayed quiet. The wound did the singing. Elias leaned forward, sleep falling from him like dust. "Look at that," he murmured, not to Leora, not even to the vase, but to the moment itself. "The break has learned a new language." They turned the vase gently, and the molten line drifted across shelves and books and the old clock that never kept time. Wherever the light touched, dull things remembered they could shine. It slid over a cracked bowl, and for a second the bowl looked proud, as if standing up straighter in its own skin. It stroked the scar in the wooden table, and the scar glowed like a path. Outside, a breeze pressed its cool face against the window. Leora lifted the vase and carried it to the doorway. The ribbon of light spilled onto the path, folding and unfolding over stones until it rested on a patch of thistle no one could love. Under that glow, the thistle became a small crown. "People will say it's still broken," Leora said, voice soft. Her hair fell over the faint birthmark she always hid, the one shaped like a crooked leaf at her temple. "People will say many things," Elias answered. He did not touch the vase. He kept his hands near it as one keeps hands near a fire, close enough for warmth, far enough for respect. But who listens to the chorus when a single true note is ringing? They heard footsteps on the lane. A neighbor, old Mara, passed by with her shawl bunched at her throat. She paused, drawn by the light. "Odd lamp," she said, peering. "Your candle leaks." "It's only that it has found a door," Elias replied, and Mara, who had lived long enough to hear sense in strange sentences, nodded once and moved on lighter than she'd come. Leora felt the glow change something inside her. The way sunshine warms stone until even the stone believes it can give back heat. She pushed her hair from her temple. The moon, the vase, the road. Everything seemed to agree without speaking. Some marks are not mistakes. They are maps. "Tomorrow is the lantern walk," Leora said, thinking of the children who carried jars with holes punched in them, stars trapped in circles of tin. "May I take this? Just for the night?" Elias looked at the seam of light, then at the girl who wanted to carry it. "Light should travel," he said. "But promise me one thing." "What thing?" "If someone says it is only a crack, tell them it is a window." Leora smiled. She would tell them more than that, she decided. She would show them. She cradled the vase like a lantern that had finally remembered what it was for, and the ribbon of gold slid ahead of her on the path, not merely lighting the way, but blessing it. A heavy silence lingered in the air as Elian sat by the river, watching the water flow as if it carried away the secrets of the world. The sky was painted with soft evening colors, orange, rose, and violet melting together, and yet he felt a deep ache inside. He thought of the vase, of how the cracks had once made it worthless in the eyes of its owner, and how the old monk had given it new meaning. For the first time, Elian whispered to himself, "Am I like that vase?" He thought of his mistakes, of the times he had failed in school, of how others mocked him for being too quiet, too strange, too different. He remembered standing in a crowd of other boys, all of them strong and confident, while he felt small and invisible. He carried those cracks within, cracks that no one seemed to want, cracks that made him believe he was broken. But the river whispered back with its steady voice, "Brokenness is not the end. Water only flows where there is space. Cracks allow the light to enter." That night, Elian dreamed of walking down a road where everyone carried a vessel. Some held shining silver cups, others carried bowls carved of stone. But his own vessel was chipped and uneven. He lowered his head, ashamed. Yet when he walked further, he noticed something strange. The cups without cracks carried only darkness inside, while his broken vessel leaked rays of light that guided his way. He woke with tears in his eyes, uncertain if they were of sadness or joy. For the first time, he wondered if perhaps his imperfections held something hidden, something waiting to shine. The next day, he returned to the monk. The old man smiled as if he had been waiting. "Tell me," the monk asked, "what do you see when you look at yourself?" Elian hesitated. "I see mistakes, weakness, things I wish I could change." The monk's voice was calm. "And yet those are the very things that make your light possible. A vessel without cracks cannot share what is within. The question is not whether you are broken, but whether you will choose to shine through the brokenness." Elian sat in silence, his chest rising with a slow breath. For the first time, the word broken did not feel like an insult. It felt like a possibility. That evening, as the village gathered for the midsummer festival, Elian walked among them differently. He saw the farmer who always shouted at his ox, and suddenly noticed the loneliness behind the man's eyes. He saw the young girl who laughed too loudly, and realized it was only to hide her fear of being ignored. He saw the cracks in everyone, not just himself. And in that moment, the world did not seem so cruel. It seemed human. The village square glowed with 1,000 small flames. Lanterns, shaped like stars, moons, and birds, floated above the heads of the crowd, their golden light swaying in the warm night breeze. Music drifted from the center, soft drums and flutes carrying laughter through the air. Children ran in circles, their lanterns swinging like tiny suns in their hands. Elian stood at the edge of it all, his heart heavy with both awe and hesitation. He had always avoided this night, afraid of being seen, afraid of standing out. Yet tonight something was different. He remembered the monk's words. "The question is not whether you are broken, but whether you will choose to shine." In the corner of the square, an old tradition was being carried out. Villagers placed candles into clay vessels and then set them on the river. The glowing bowls drifted downstream, each one carrying a prayer, a dream, or a sorrow meant to be released into the night. Some vessels were perfect and smooth, their flames steady. Others, chipped or cracked, let the fire flicker wildly, spilling light onto the water in unpredictable ways. Elian felt his breath catch. He imagined himself as one of those vessels, drifting with his own imperfect light, uncertain where the river would carry him. A soft voice broke his thoughts. "Why don't you make one?" It was Leora, a girl his age with hair the color of dusk and eyes that always seemed to hold mischief and kindness at once. She held out a small clay pot and a candle. "Everyone makes one. It doesn't matter if it's perfect." Elian hesitated. "But what if mine breaks? What if it looks wrong?" Leora tilted her head and smiled. "Then it will shine differently. Isn't that the point?" Her words wrapped around his heart like a warm scarf. Slowly, he took the pot, lit the candle and knelt by the river. His hands shook as he placed the vessel on the water's surface. For a moment it wobbled, threatening to tip. But then the current steadied it, and the flame burned bright. Through the cracks in the clay, golden rays spilled out, painting the water with trembling paths of light. Gasps rose from those nearby. Children pointed, eyes wide. Even the elders leaned closer to watch. The broken pot, instead of failing, had become the most beautiful lantern of all, casting more light than any of the unbroken ones. Elian's chest tightened, but this time not with shame, with wonder. He realized the truth. The very thing he feared most, his cracks, had become the source of his strength. His light was not hidden anymore. Leora touched his arm softly. "See? You were never broken. You were only waiting to shine." Above them, the night sky stretched endless and dark, yet filled with stars that shone all the brighter because of the darkness around them. And Elian, for the first time in his life, felt like one of those stars, imperfect but burning. The lanterns drifted downstream like a constellation scattered upon water. Elian stood by the bank long after the others had returned to the music and dancing, his eyes following the fragile flames as they floated into the distance. Some flickered out, swallowed by the night, but his broken vessel still burned, the cracks releasing ribbons of golden light that touched every stone, every ripple, every curve of the riverbank. The river seemed to whisper to him, carrying its message through the steady hum of flowing water. "You shine because of your wounds, not in spite of them." He pressed a hand to his chest, where his heart thudded like a drum caught between fear and wonder. For so many years, he had believed the opposite. He thought happiness was for those without scars, for the perfect and unbroken. But here, in the glow of a cracked vessel, the world was teaching him a different story. Behind him, laughter rang out. Leora skipped down the path with a lantern in her hand, its flame trembling as if it, too, shared her joy. She stopped when she reached him, her breath light and quick. "Everyone is talking about your lantern," she said. "Some of the elders say they've never seen anything like it." Elian's cheeks warmed. "It was an accident." "No," Leora replied, shaking her head. "It was a gift. You just didn't see it until now." They walked together by the river, silence growing between them. Not heavy silence, but the kind that feels like an unspoken understanding. Finally, Leora whispered, "You know, I have my own cracks." Elian turned to her, surprised. She seemed so full of life, so free of the weight he carried. "What do you mean?" She brushed back her hair, revealing a faint scar along her jaw. "When I was a child, I fell into the river during a storm. The current dragged me under, and when I was pulled out, I carried this scar. For years I hid it. I thought it made me ugly. But my grandmother told me something I never forgot. The river marked you because it wanted to keep you. That means you are chosen, not ruined." Her words struck deep within him. Chosen, not ruined. The phrase echoed in his mind like a bell. Was that what his cracks meant? Not failure, not shame, but a mark of being chosen by life to carry light in a different way. He looked again at the river, where his lantern still floated bravely, its cracks glowing like golden veins. A strange peace washed over him. For the first time, he no longer wished to be flawless. He no longer wanted to hide. Perhaps, he said softly, our cracks are how we speak to the world without words. Leora smiled, her lantern flame flickering against her face. Then speak, Elian, because I think the world is ready to listen. And as the night deepened, he felt a truth settle inside him like a seed finding soil. Happiness was not the absence of flaws, but the courage to shine through them. The next morning, the village square was buzzing with talk of the lanterns. Children mimicked the way Elian's cracked vessel had spilled light over the river, while elders stroked their beards and murmured about omens. Some called it a blessing, others a sign. Elian listened quietly, unsure what to feel. When the crowd thinned, the old monk appeared, walking slowly with his staff tapping against the cobblestones. His eyes, bright as if they carried centuries of starlight, settled on Elian. So, he said with a knowing smile, the world has seen your cracks. Elian lowered his head. And they say it was beautiful. The monk nodded. And what do you say? Elian hesitated. The words caught in his throat, heavy but aching to be spoken. I don't feel broken anymore. I feel alive, as if the pieces of me are not mistakes but something meant to be. The monk's smile deepened. Good, then it is time you see the garden. He led Elian and Leora down a hidden path behind the temple, where ivy curled over stone walls and the scent of jasmine filled the air. At the end of the path stood a gate, weathered and half open, leading into a garden unlike any Elian had ever seen. Everywhere there were vessels, jars, bowls, vases, each cracked, chipped, or scarred. But instead of being discarded, each one had been mended with gold, silver, or glass. Some cracks gleamed like lightning bolts, others glowed faintly as sunlight passed through colored resin. The garden sparkled as though stars had fallen from the sky and chosen to rest in clay. Elian's breath caught. They're beautiful. These, said the monk, his voice tender, are the vessels of those who learned the truth before you. Each piece here once carried shame. Each was once thrown aside. But their cracks became their beauty, their uniqueness, their story. This is the garden of imperfections, and it teaches us this: worth is never destroyed by damage. It is revealed through it. Leora touched one of the vases gently, her eyes wide. It's like every scar is a painting, she whispered. The monk turned to Elian. And so are you. The question is not whether you will hide your cracks, but whether you will let them be filled with love, with courage, with light. Do this, and you will never again call yourself broken. Elian stood in the middle of the garden, surrounded by vessels that had once been despised, but now shone with a beauty beyond perfection. He felt his chest expand with a quiet strength, as if a door inside him had finally opened. For the first time, he thought of his life not as a story of flaws, but as a masterpiece in progress. Above the garden, sunlight filtered through the leaves, falling across his face like a blessing. He closed his eyes and whispered to himself, I am enough. Even with my cracks, I am enough. And the garden seemed to answer, its golden seams glinting in agreement. For many days after the festival, Elian carried a new kind of calm within him. He visited the river each morning, watched the sun rise over the water, and whispered words of gratitude he had never thought to speak before. Yet, as with all journeys, peace is tested not in the quiet mornings, but in the nights when storms arrive. That night, a storm unlike any the village had seen in years rolled over the hills. The sky cracked with thunder, rain slashed at rooftops, and the river swelled angrily, tearing at its banks. Villagers hurried to secure their homes, lanterns extinguished one by one until the square was swallowed in darkness. Elian and Leora ran to help an old woman whose roof was caving in. As they carried her belongings to safety, Elian noticed something. The Garden of Imperfections lay directly in the path of the rising river. If the water spilled over, the vessels, each mended with love and history, would be swept away. His heart pounded. He could not let that happen. Leora, he shouted over the storm, we have to save the vessels. Together they sprinted down the hidden path, mud sucking at their feet. When they reached the garden, water was already rushing in, crashing against the first row of glowing jars. The vessels trembled, their golden seams catching lightning in flashes of brilliance. Elian grabbed one, then another, stacking them into a basket. Leora did the same, her hair plastered to her face, her hands shaking but determined. But there were too many. The storm was merciless, and with every wave, more vessels toppled into the flood. In desperation, Elian looked at his own cracked lantern, the one that had shone on the river days before. He still carried it close, wrapped in cloth. Pulling it free, he lit a candle inside and placed it at the garden's entrance. The flame flickered wildly, but through the cracks it spilled out into the storm, golden light slicing through the chaos. Something strange happened. The vessels around it began to glow brighter, as though responding to its call. Each crack, each seam, began to pulse with light, defying the storm. The garden was no longer a place of weakness. It became a beacon. Villagers, drawn by the glow, came rushing with baskets and cloths. They formed a line, passing vessels from one hand to another, rescuing them from the flood. Even the monk arrived, his staff raised high, his eyes shining with pride. "Elian!" he cried through the rain. "Do you see now? It is not perfection that saves us, but the light we let through our wounds. Tonight your cracks guide us all." Elian's chest surged with a fierce courage. His hands, once ashamed of their weakness, now worked with strength and certainty. Vessel by vessel, the garden was saved, not because it was flawless, but because broken things had chosen to shine together. When the storm finally passed, the villagers stood soaked and trembling, but alive. The vessels, though scarred and battered, sat safe in baskets all around them, glowing faintly as if in gratitude. Elian sank to his knees, rain mixing with tears on his face. He had feared his cracks, but tonight they had become his greatest strength. And as dawn broke over the soaked earth, the river calmed, carrying away the last of the storm's rage. The village would rebuild, the garden would stand again, and Elian, though still imperfect, would never again see himself as less. For he had learned the truth written in gold across every broken vessel. Imperfection is not the end of worth, but the beginning of light. The morning after the storm, the village looked as though the earth had sighed and reshaped itself. Roofs sagged, fields glistened with mud, and broken branches littered the square. Yet amid the ruin, something extraordinary had happened. The vessels, rescued from the flood, now shone brighter than ever. Their golden seams sparkled in the sunlight, each scar alive with light, as if the storm had washed away every trace of shame they once carried. Elian stood among them, his cracked lantern in his hands. Its flame had burned through the night, guiding villagers to safety, and though the clay was chipped even more from the rain's fury, it glowed with a strength he had never seen before. He touched the cracks gently and whispered, "You are not broken. You are alive." The monk approached, leaning on his staff, his robes still damp. "Do you see now, Elian?" he asked softly. "Happiness is not found in chasing perfection, nor in hiding what we fear. It is found in accepting ourselves fully, scars and all, and letting those scars teach the world how to see beauty differently." Elian nodded. "I thought cracks made me weak, but they let me give something no perfect vessel could." The monk's smile was warm, like the morning sun. "Exactly. The world needs the light that only you can pour through your wounds. Remember this always." As the villagers gathered, they began to set the vessels back into the garden. But something had changed in their eyes. No one looked at the cracks as flaws anymore. They admired them, even traced the golden seams with reverence. Mothers pointed them out to their children, saying, "See, this is how beauty survives the storm." Leora stood beside Elian, her scar catching the light like a silver thread. She whispered, "I used to think we had to hide who we are to be loved, but last night proved the opposite. We are loved because of what makes us different." Elian's chest swelled with a strange mix of gratitude and courage. He realized he no longer feared being seen. His cracks were not shadows to hide but lanterns to carry, and the thought brought him peace deeper than any he had known. That evening, as the sun sank and the first stars awoke, the villagers lit their lanterns once more. They carried them to the river, but this time something new happened. Instead of only sending their vessels away, they held them high, letting their light spill into the faces around them, illuminating one another. The river shimmered with reflected gold, not from perfect flames, but from flames spilling through broken vessels. Elian lifted his own lantern, the cracks glowing like rivers of fire. For the first time in his life, he stood tall in the crowd, not hiding, not shrinking, but shining. And he felt the truth echo within him. Happiness is not the absence of wounds, but the courage to carry light through them. The monk's voice carried across the gathering. Tonight, remember, every crack you bear is a window. Let the light out. Let the world see you. For it is only through imperfection that true beauty is born. And as the village glowed under a sky of stars and lanterns alike, Elian understood. His journey was not about becoming flawless. It was about becoming whole. The night stretched deep and velvet, pierced by the glow of lanterns rising into the sky. Some drifted high until they became stars among stars, while others floated low, hovering close as if unwilling to leave the arms of the village. Elian stood among his people, his cracked lantern cradled in both hands, and felt for the first time that he belonged. Not in spite of his wounds, but because of them. The monk raised his staff and the music softened. Tonight, he said, his voice carrying through the crowd, we celebrate not perfection, but truth. And the truth is this: life was never meant to be flawless. Stones break, rivers flood, hearts crack. Yet it is through those cracks that light, wisdom, and love pour into the world. The broken vessel gives more than the perfect one ever could. Silence followed, thick with awe, until someone began to hum. It was Leora, her voice soft but steady, weaving through the air like a thread of silver. Soon others joined, until the square filled with a song that seemed to come not from mouths but from hearts. The melody rose and fell, carrying sorrow, hope, and joy together, like waves rolling endlessly toward the shore. Elian closed his eyes and listened. For years, he had silenced himself, afraid his voice had no place in the world. But now, carried by the song, he felt something awaken inside him. He opened his mouth and sang. Quietly at first, then stronger, his voice rising with the others. To his amazement, it did not sound broken. It sounded whole, like the voice of someone who had finally stepped into his own light. As the villagers sang, their lanterns glowed brighter, the cracks spilling golden rivers across the square. The light reached the Garden of Imperfections, where the rescued vessels shimmered as though alive, their scars singing too. The air pulsed with radiance until it seemed the very sky leaned closer to listen. When the song ended, silence returned, but it was a silence filled with warmth, like embers glowing after fire. Elian looked around and saw faces softened by tears, by smiles, by understanding. For once, every person seemed to know. They too carried cracks, and they too were worthy of light. Leora touched Elian's arm. Do you feel it? She whispered. He nodded, his chest full to bursting. I do. We are not broken things. We are lanterns. The monk stepped forward, placing a hand on Elian's shoulder. Remember this night, child. When doubt comes, when shadows return, remember, your cracks are not scars to hide. They are songs to be sung, rivers to be lit, bridges to connect you with others. Happiness is not about being whole without wounds. It is about shining through them. Elian looked to the sky, where lanterns mingled with stars, and felt tears slip down his cheeks. Not of sorrow, but of gratitude. His journey had not erased his pain, but it had transformed it. His imperfections had become his offering, his purpose, his beauty. And so the story closed not with an ending, but with a beginning. The beginning of a life lived not in hiding, but in shining. For every crack, every scar, every imperfection in him had become a part of the light he would carry into the world. And the world, needing that light, would never again call him broken.